10 minutes past 2 from the studios of Adaba 8.9 FM. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of Conversation with Adaba FM. We apologize that we're coming a bit late. My name is Dimeji and I've been joined on the program this afternoon by Otunba, Dele, Olapeju.
Yes, you're right.
He retired as a director from the Federal Ministry of Education. He's also a chief from Idoani.
Yes.
So this afternoon we'll be looking at education sector. We'll talk about insecurity. We'll also talk about community policing, which is also part of one of the solutions that people have canvassed to insecurity. You're welcome on the program, Otunba.
Thank you.
Let's begin from education. You know, I've had people talk about this oftentimes, that the international benchmark for the education budget of any country should be between 15 to 20%. And UNESCO has confirmed this, because there was a time that the education minister and some people within the Nigerian government said that it was a lie. So there were journalists who contacted UNESCO, and UNESCO said that the international benchmark is between 15 to 20%. Now, you work with the Federal Ministry of Education. In the year 2020, the education budget was 6.5% of the total budget. In 2021, it was 5.6%. That's a decline. And then this year, it is 5.4% of the total budget. Why do you think, as someone who used to be an insider, why do you think that the Nigerian government has not been able to keep up with the international benchmark?
Well, I think that figure is not actually correct. Because
which of the figures?
The figure you have just read out. Because
the statistics?
Yes, or
what the international benchmark?
No, the international benchmark is okay. But the fact that we are running, education is on the concurrent list. So the federal budget is different from the state budget.
I'm talking about the federal budget.
Yes, what I'm saying is the benchmark of a country comprises those of the federal and the state. But most often we only look at the federal budget, which is range between 5 something to 8 point something. If you put the quantum of the budget of state governments together and add it to the federal, it increases the figure. Then the private sector contribution to education is also there. For instance, we had initially until 1990.
The international benchmark does not refer to.
It's national benchmark.
He's talking about. It does not refer to a private contribution. He's saying the education budget of a country, and that would not include the private sector. You could find the state government budget. No. That one is
and down to the
local government.
To the local government. So I think there's no argument about the fact remains that education has been underfunded. So we can. I think. Even we talk of the benchmark and so on, the conclusion is that there is underfunding in the education sector, and I think the two of us agree together that in terms of benchmarking is just to give the average quantum of money that can be spent. It can increase more than what depending on the priority of the government. Yes. So we all agreed that education is being underfunded in this country.
Why do you think that has been? Is it that we're prioritizing what we shouldn't be prioritizing? Well, because why I'm asking you that is that in developed climes, you find government prioritizing education because there's no country that can thrive if its education sector does not thrive. For instance, if you look at universities in developed climes, they are research centers. They come up with medicine. They come up with breakthroughs in different sectors of human life. So, why do you think we have not been able to tour this path in Nigeria?
I think there are two reasons for this. One, the government is being run by those who don't understand the running of governance, and I think. I am very serious about this because if for almost since 1990 when democracy came back, we have been wobbling in terms of education. The education sector, for instance, if you talk of the leadership of the country, the many crises about certificate things in the polity governors don't having certificates and so on is because governance is just about the quantum of money you steal from it rather than the service you give. We
In
throw
Nigeria?
in Nigeria.
Okay.
We throw our wrong legs into governance, and those who are supposed to actually help us in governance are armchair critics who are on the outside line of CSOs, civil society organizations, who ought to put themselves into the act of governance, and they can do it better. But they feel that governance, politics is only for the riffraffs, for the thugs, and so on. That is our bane.
Now, what do you think? How do we start moving in this right direction? How do we start moving in this right direction?
Now, I think we must prioritize education. We had when I was in the Federal Ministry of Education, we had a roadmap during the time of Samegu as minister. We had a roadmap, and we looked at how we can refocus on education. The roadmap was just a paper tiger. Immediately, the man went to the Senate. The thing was discarded. Now, both the federal government and the state government must come to terms with the fact that education is the fulcrum of development. There is no nation that has developed to its level without education. And education is not just about certificate qualification. Most of the things we do in this country is certification.
Yeah.
Certification, not education. So until we go back to the planning stage and prioritize our priorities and make education the fulcrum of development, you can't get it better. If you look at what is happening in the nation, a lot of people have discarded education. What they are doing now is now certification, and certification cannot take us anywhere, because if you develop half-baked graduates who are doctors in the health sector, they will kill a lot of other patients under them because of their lack of knowledge. So we need to get the right people into the right levels.
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think should even be the role of government in the education sector? Why I'm asking you this, there are climes where many of the universities are privately run. You hardly find government-owned universities, and they are doing better. Can we not do this part in Nigeria?
I think the very mistake that was made was during the military era. University of Ife was not owned by the federal government that time. But they now came and they took over all the universities. And they are still building more universities. Of course,
in fact, every state wants a federal university.
It's
becoming political.
No,
now. They agitate for it, they ask for it.
When I was in Federal Ministry of Education, we felt that every state has a right to the federal largesse. So now that with Jonathan, yes, of course, with the coming of Jonathan, he got in 9 universities, yes. And there's no state in Nigeria that doesn't have a federal presence. Well, we cannot, the political economy, we cannot divorce the issue of politics from whatever we do. But the only thing is that what is the production level of the graduates? Are we producing graduates that are on the shelf or off the shelf? Most of the graduates in Nigeria are on the shelf. Nobody will ask them, what is your qualification? Because they are not competitive. But in other climes, the moment you leave your university, a job is waiting for you, or a job is being created by you. Yeah. So that's the difference. There are job seekers in Nigeria, but there are wealth creators in other climes. So that's the difference between the certification we have and the education they have in other climes.
Talking about job creators, does that not have more to do with the way the university education is structured in those climes? You find if you interact with people in those climes, you find the situation that the education is structured in such a way that encourages entrepreneurship, where people don't just focus on the letters of their book, but they also focus on ways to create wealth, to create jobs and all of that. Should we not be moving? Fine, there are private universities who are already doing that in Nigeria. Should government universities not lay more emphasis on this?
I think that's the new focus. But the new focus is now being bedeviled by the issue of prolonged strikes. Now, for instance, I recall that there was a time the education policy said it was hinged on 3 H's: the head, the heart, and the hand.
Hmm.
The head is the cognitive level of education. The hand is psychomotor.
And the hand is the creative aspect of it.
Yeah, of course, And then the heart is both at the affective and the fact that you think out what is right for in terms of research, global research, and so on. And that we have scholars who are global citizens who can match their own. For instance, look at Professor Oluyinka Olutoye. He graduated from King's College and then left to University of OAU. And before he went to America, he is the first person in the world to do surgery on an unborn child. That is global competitiveness.
There are many of those.
That's what I'm saying.
Like
when they go out,
for instance, the guy who discovered that former football stars in the U.S. When I say football now, I'm referring to their own kind of football, not soccer,
Okay.
their own kind of football that they suffer concussion from the way and that it affects their brain. The guy who discovered it is a Nigerian.
Yes.
And from University of Calabar, and the guy who also worked on the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine started from here. So there are many of those.
So yes, we agree that we have the quality in terms of the stuff of Nigerians, but the environment is very, very inclement. The environment that will allow, for instance, like I said, there are about for the past 16 years, as it were, since 1999. When democracy returned to this country, ASUU had gone on strike for 16 times. So when there are strikes like that, it will derail the system of research. And that inside of researching, these children they're not in the school system; they are all on the streets, and that's there's malcontent, there's discontentment, in the public education, and public education is it that can propel and galvanize development in this country.
Now, talking about ASUU strikes, I understand that you were part of the negotiating team from the Federal Ministry of Education
in 2019.
In 2009.
2009, yes.
Now, the question that many Nigerians have asked is that why did the federal government become part of an agreement that it cannot keep?
I think the federal government is lazy in terms of information.
Okay.
And the ASUU is very, very vocal. What has happened is not that the federal government has reneged on the negotiation. In fact, the 2009 agreement was a product of the agreement of 2001.
Yeah.
Now and then, the agreement it doesn't have a time shelf, because in terms of provisions, there is a provision for continuous negotiation and agreements. Of course, but the issue is that the federal government on its own side did a wrong thing by allowing people who are not the ones to negotiate on its behalf to be with there. What am I saying? I have always, when I was in the Federal Ministry of Education and in terms of policy advice, we have given them as civil servants, we have given the federal government, the political heads, the advice that this negotiation should be at the level of each individual university. The governing council of the university should negotiate. For instance, the cost of living index. When we are talking
from state to state, varies. You cannot compare Lagos with those states.
Yes. So why do you negotiate an agreement that a professor in Sokoto will be earning the same salary with the professor in Abuja or even Bayelsa? The cost of living index is very different. And in other countries, a professor earns a salary based on his output to the system. A professor the salary of a professor can be higher than that of a VC.
Yes.
If he can bring out research and some money into the system for the university. So
if you can get grants,
yes. Most of the universities abroad run on grants.
Yes.
Especially,
and many of the researchers as well.
Of course.
You can convince some of these multinationals that this is what I want to do. They dole out grants.
I recall that in 2003, at NUC, we had a university stakeholders conference where we recommended to government that, look, this issue of budget cycle cannot survive the university system. Let us have a grant system in such a way that government will say, okay, University A, take this grant. Go and look for research and other donations and so on, and build up yourself. And then from student school fees. And then we had the education bank that time, before Obasanjo came and then said, no, the idea of education bank is not longer feasible. Now, education bank was supposed to give bursaries and scholarships to indigent students. While the rich ones will go to the private universities, the indigent ones will access funds from government in order to meet their financial needs. But today we don't have an education bank, and there's no way for the poor people to attend public education in Nigeria.
Now, like you said, ASU has gone on strike so many times between 1999 and up to now. Now, the question is, there's an ongoing discussion about state universities and federal universities. Why is there? Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Many people have asked why state universities always tag along when federal universities go on strike. What is your take on this?
Come again.
My question is that there's an ongoing discussion about why many people have asked why state universities, who have a different employer entirely, they are being run by state government. Why should they tag along anytime federal universities go on strike?
What ASU does is they are the cannon foders. The state universities are the cannon foders. Because if the federal universities go on strike and the state universities are on, then the strike will not be meaningful any longer. So they want more people, more sympathy.
But what normally happens, or what usually happens, is that after agreement has been reached with the federal government, these people will still come down to the state government, to the state level, and start trying to broker a deal with their state government. So why should they go on strike in the first instance?
I agree with you, because that is actually the contraption in the Nigerian system. Ordinarily, if the governors' forum were to be a serious forum, was to be a very serious forum, they should have gone to the court to challenge ASU that you cannot, hoodwink us by bringing in our state universities. The state universities belong to the state governments, so there's no link. Meanwhile, it is the same ASU that you say want true federalism. True federalism is that we need the federal government to run its own, the state government should be empowered to run their own. Yet, when it comes to ASU, there's no true federalism. That's the dilemma. We expect that, for instance, a university like Adaba University should not go on strike. The visitor to that university is our governor, who is a legal luminary. He ought to know, the governor of the Ondo State ought to know that ASU is under him, or ASU of Otunba should be under him, and that he should be able to regulate their activities. Now, we have a madness in this country that whenever ASU is on strike, everybody, all universities are just part
because why I'm asking you that question is, if I have an employer, and you have your own separate employer, and then if I go on strike, why should you go on strike if you have different employers?
I accept your pontification that state governments don't have any business to be on strike. Because at the end of the day, whatever they are negotiating up there is for the federal universities. Over the years, the 2009 agreement, the 2001 agreement, they have always been agreements for the federal government. Later on, after calling off the strike, they say, now go and negotiate with your state governments. Why are we wasting the time of these public university students? When, the Akwa Ibom State University, the Abia State University are different, they have different government councils and different visitors. Mr. President is a visitor to federal universities. Let him go and negotiate with, as it were. Normally, it should be at the level of the governing councils of each university, because the employer of each university's staff is the governing council, not the federal government. So, if it's the governing council, then the level of negotiation should be you stop at the level of governing council of each university, and that is the way the system should run. If we do not correct that mistake, we shall continue to be thinking inside the box of ASU boxing us into a corner.
Now, what do you think? Do you see an end in sight? Because when you look at ASU strike, it has really put effect. And even sometimes when agreement has been reached, when strike is called off, you have other unions within the university system like NASU, like SANU, coming up with their own strike and say, oh, we want to do our own negotiation. So, and then if you think about lives that are tied, not just people who earn their daily bread on some of these campuses. I've had situations where people who needed their transcript for masters or for outside the country or for a job, who needed certificate, the original copy of their certificate, could not get it, and they have missed these opportunities. Is there an end strike to ASU strike? An end side to ASU strikes?
As long as we think inside the box, within the box, there's no end in sight. Now, I think the federal government and the state government and parents must come to terms with the reality. ASU has a consistency in strikes. There is often no year that they have not gone on strike. I've talked of 16 times for 23 years. If you look at it,
that's more than 4 years.
Four and a half years. ASU has been on strike for 4.5 years within 23 years.
From 1990,
yes, and I think they enjoy it because one, some of their members are lecturers at private universities. Some of their lecturers are government, are politicians. So it's a win-win situation for them. But you know, if we as a nation now say no, and the unfortunate aspect of this is that the students are not facing the reality. They often accuse federal government, answer our lecturers, but they don't accuse the lecturers who will also, at the end of every strike, they collect all the salaries of the time of the strike they have not worked for. Meanwhile, there is nobody who compensates the students from the time lost. Some of them are very old. Just they want to go and serve, and they are already 29 years old now with the 6 months now.
And they can't mobilize.
They cannot be mobilized by
NYC.
Yes. So I think in our days, I was a founding member of National Institute of Nigerian Students. When it was prescribed by Obasanjo, the nurse was prescribed to NANS, and we had to form NANS. In our days, we were focused on ideas. But these days, you see the members of the National Institute of Nigerian Students, they are living in opulence. The best cars of this world are
they even students?
Many
of them are over 30. Yes, many of them are close to 40.
Of course, you know, even the current NANS president.
He has said it's not up to 40. He has said it's not up to 40. Now, let's talk about insecurity. You're from Idwani.
Yes.
The axis is known for incidents of kidnapping. There was even a time that a traditional ruler was murdered on
the local government.
Yeah, that is
Olufon
of Ifon. Now, you know, oftentimes when Nigerians talk about insecurity, they talk about the symptoms and not the cause. Kidnapping is just a symptom. Ransom taking is just a symptom. If you were asked, if we were to trace how all of this started, where will you place the blame?
The blame is in the level of governance. The protection of lives of the citizens is the primary responsibility of any government. This government has failed us in protecting our lives.
This government or successive government?
Well, successive governments, but this has been the worst. Now, when in
did it just start from this government?
I think the act of governance.
That's my question. Did it just start from this government?
This government came with the proviso that they want to cure the ills, but instead of curing the ills, they have put more ills and then embalmed us with a very terminal disease. You know, in terms of governance. If we continue this way, Nigeria becomes a failed state.
Now, as a community leader, what roles? There are people who have talked about engaging hunters, the use of community policing, and they're using the people at the local level for intelligence gathering. as a community leader, what roles do you think communities can play in all of this?
I think we have had that in Irekari, where I come from. That's the 4 communities of Irekari. That was were the first to even pull the alarm to government when I think it was 2019 that we issued a 21-day ultimatum to the Fulanis to leave our land. The governor called us and called our obas and said, "Why do you give this ultimatum?" And when we explained, and in fact that was what gave birth to Amotekun. Now, because definitely at a stage, the Fulani invaders.
Let us use that word.
Okay, the terrorists, the insurgents came, came into our forests, and they were doing more damage to our forests than the farmers. So we had to, start to use our local hunters to chase them. I think.
How effective was that?
It was very effective, but each time we did that, the problem of ransom payment and the problem of manpower, I think government is now doing it because the security level in terms of agents of government who are in the police, in the Amotekun, they are few, in terms of the average number to the population. Now that they are recruiting more, there will be more policing, and that we should not leave security into the hands of government alone. Like you said, information gathering. Most of the things that allow the breakthrough that government has had is because there are informants that give them adequate information as to the movements, as to suspicious movements of people, and then the government becomes successful in terms of tracking them. Now we must re-educate the masses, and that's at the level of community.
Just like you just mentioned, we do this generalization of saying so and so tribe, but we've had cases in this country where people were caught. We had cases of Yoruba kidnappers that were caught who said they often act as that they would often act as Fulani, yes, and dress as Fulani to make people believe that they are Fulani. The incident in Owo, names have been released. We've had where people said that they do not, when it happened, the government said that they were ISWAP members. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
They were ISWAP members. Now we know the ethnic group that they come from now. Now, what do you think? How do you think we got here, and what do you think that we can do to flush out some of these collaborators from among our people?
Well, I think even when Jesus Christ had 12 disciples, there was always a Judas. So we expect that there will be Judases among us. Shofalawon, during the time of Abiola, was a Judas and he betrayed MK Abiola's wife. So I think we have always, as far as political economy is concerned, as long as poverty is concerned, people will always see ransom or kidnapping as a way out of the political disaster they have. So they will always collaborate with the foreign invaders to assist in kidnapping. But at least once you make very good examples of those who take, I think there was time armed robbery was very rampant in this country. The moment they started executing in the Barbie show and so on, then the thing took a downward turn. I think government must be serious in terms of those who are arrested, and let us do a follow-up on how the judicial system takes its course, so that we don't keep on releasing those that have been arrested back to crime. You look at what happened in Kuje. Those who are arrested after a long something and put in jail were released by their mates, and they are now in the system, back to the system.
All right, we'll take a break now. We'll be right back. It's still conversation with Adaba FM, and I've been speaking with Otunba Dele Olapeju. Olapeju. We'll take a break now, and we'll be right back.
Please. Before now, we were somewhere, but right now we have moved on. Adaba marketing office to number 1 over the Shida. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. To number 1 over the Shida. advertisement, Adaba, education, Adaba, entertainment, Adaba, we are the best, Adaba, political views, Adaba, current affairs.
20 minutes before 3 from studios of Adaba 8.9 FM. It's the conversation with Adaba. Now, talking about this security, are there factors within the polity that you think are fanning this vice in Nigeria?
Of course, I think if you want to be very frank, government has budgeted a lot of money and released a lot of money into buying arms and ammunition. But the more we budget, the more we release funds, the more the funds get into wrong hands. Both the military high command and those who are even buying the arms, and the philosophy behind the arms buying, arms purchase, is all compromised. For instance, we know that some of these arms go into the hands of insurgents. So are we now saying that we are kitting the insurgents to come and attack us? Most of the arms that were bought, except the high caliber ones, get into the hands of the insurgents. And then there are collaborators. There are sabotage. A lot of people sabotage the federal government in the use of the arms. And sometimes we heard that Kuje, a night before the attack, they had to remove the military presence there so that it was a softer thing for the Kuje prisoners to escape, because the system was compromised. If the system is not compromised in most of these attacks, for instance, with Kaduna, the kidnapping, Kaduna has the highest military presence in the country. We have the NDA, we have all military apparatus there. Yet they found it easy to go into the airport to attack. Before they attack the rail, and they are now back on the road. So there are collaborators and people who compromise and sabotage government. In fairness to this government has tried to keep the forces, both the army, the navy, and so on. And now that that Mr. President has spoken out, that and then the National Assembly has woken up to its responsibility, I think the success of tackling the problem of insurgency is just within sight. I am optimistic. If the present seriousness is continued, sustained, that security will be back to the country.
Some people have suggested state policing as a solution.
That's the best solution.
You also agree?
Yes, I agree, because I was born when we had state police. That's after independence. It was only the militarization and the federalization of things that made everything. For instance, how can the Inspector General of Police be the one to be commanding the police even in my village? The state governors, who are the chief security officers, don't have powers on those policemen. And so, until we go back to true federalism, to allow the regional governments to work. Now, for instance, the few months of the Western Nigerian security forces, we have seen a reduction in kidnapping in the Western Nigeria. In the Eastern Nigeria, because of IPOB and Ibabu, I think there has been conflict. But in Benue has just launched its own system, and I'm sure that it's going to stem down the issue of insecurity in that state. So I think, like Federalism said, I want to quote him. He said the state governors should go and recruit men and women into their own police. Arm them with the normal military guns for policing, and then let the federal government challenge them, then they go to court. If they can have that courage, because definitely for goodness sake, for the past 2 or 3 months or something, Governor Akeredolu has not been himself. He has been running helter-skelter to providing security in Ondo State. And the more he does it, the more some of these people sabotage him. Wow, for instance, Owo has witnessed 2 cases of serious ASWAP, according to them, and then look at Ose local government. Ifon had his own monarch, a first-class monarch, slaughtered just like a common criminal. So if we have state police, the state police will be made up of indigenes of the state, and they know all the forests, and they are familiar with the terrain. And when they see a strange face, they will be able to know and be conscious of the fact that he might be up for something. So I think I 100% support the return to state police. It's not the new system. We had it before.
Now, I've read some of your writings where you canvass for restructuring, and part of that is the state policing we just talked about. Beyond that, what outlook do you think this restructuring should have? Should it happen?
If we, of course, the outlook is that we should go back to the regional governments.
Okay.
And we should have a weak center. If we, for instance, there's what you call comparative advantage. The North has a vast array of land. They can go into cultivation through mechanization. They have a lot of dry area where they can do irrigation. Irrigation cannot work in the West because we have a lot of water here, and our season is, we don't have up to 3 months of dry season. So let each region develop according to its capacity, according to its comparative advantage, and then let us submit to the center some of those fallouts from our exercise, our economy. I think we had it before. The pyramid in Kano was not the work of any federal government. It was the work of the farmers from Kano. Up to now, the tomatoes and so on are still being imported, as it were, from the north to the west, and some of these things in the west, oranges and so on, go goes to the north. So let us allow the states to run and the regions to run. When the regions run, and there'll be a lot of belief in self-governance, there'll be a lot of all these unrest of somebody being dominated or whatever will cease, and there'll be self-governance. There is neo-colonialism in Nigeria, and we have to stop it.
So, when people talk about going back to regionalism,
yes,
one of the naughty issues that they don't often talk about is that what kind of regional government are we talking about? Would the state be scrapped and we go to what we used to have when there was one single region, and then there was the headquarters, for instance, the western region in Ibadan? Or would there still be a state? How does this regional government, how will it run?
The regional government is a mini government within a government. The regional government will not, it's just like a federal system of governance in a regional arrangement. Just like we have the federal government in Abuja, we will have the headquarters of the regional government in Western Nigeria, for instance, maybe in Ibadan, which has been the traditional regional something. There will be states.
And there will be governments.
And there will be governments. But definitely the states will be promoted, they will be allowed to run their affairs in such a way that they will be able to run their agriculture, run their security, run their economy.
Would the region have a head?
Of course, no.
What would that person be?
Now, for instance, I think I was in Canada in 2002. In Canada, they have a provincial system.
Yes,
and that in the province, they have ministers of education. Out of the 6 ministers of education, one is the chairman of the education ministry. So it's just like the federal.
So from among the governors.
Yes,
Okay.
For instance, if we have 7 states within Western region, we have a center in Ibadan, and then the center will be fed by the tributaries, and then they will be allowed some levels of governance. It's not going to be unitary government. Unitary government is what is killing us in this country, because Abuja is there, it's far away from the average, in Bayelsa, in Yenagoa, and so on. So we need that regional government, and the regional government will now, I think we need to arrange a system of governance that might be unique to us. We don't, we cannot import systems that don't match us. We have been on executive presidency now, imported from America.
We try parliamentary.
It's not working. We try but we can have a mixture of both, and then or have a synergy between parliamentary and the executive presidency, and then we can maybe. But I think we must try new things. The problem is not even about. We have a lot of people who are disenchanted. Those who are supposed to be running us are not running us. People think that politics is for people who can tell lies. That's not correct. The moment we allow people who are not intelligent than us to run us, then we are under their subjugation. That's the problem.
The problem within the politics is so much about the system or the kind of system that will run, or the people running the system.
Both. I think if we bring an average Japanese, for instance, to come to Nigeria and run what we are running, they will run it successfully because they are very serious people, they are very dedicated, and they are very patriotic. If you look at the level of patriotism in Nigeria is so low, and you don't blame them because of course everything in Nigeria, the system is always corrupted. We would go into elections, we use bags of rice to bag the people. There is money bags, there is vote buying, and those who are buying the votes know that once they get into government, that is all, because we already paid the price of your democracy. So issues of vote buying, of compromising the electoral system is one of the issues that we must face. So I think INEC, for instance, has been trying to do some reforms, and I give kudos to this present assembly for being serious about electoral reforms. But how far they can implement these things, because we have a lot of things, provisions in the constitution that are not followed, and that's why we need to say that we want to dump the 1999 military constitution and have the people's constitution, which I think I am part of those who canvass for a new constitution that will be, through the people's signature.
Now, talking about the 2023 elections, there's been a lot of brickbats in the build-up to the election, from the APC to the Labour Party. They call themselves Obedient, and then the PDP as well. Now, what effect do you think this will have on the polity in the build-up to the election? There are people who believe that all these brickbats are further dividing, polarizing the country along religious and ethnic lines.
Well, I think you permit us in this situation. During the Abiola era, when they had a Muslim ticket, there was no hue and cry.
So what is wrong?
But what has changed? What has changed is that at that time there was a lot of innocence in terms of people's reaction to things. Now they have seen 7 years of this government, for instance, and they have seen that a lot of appointments, a lot of things are done, with an disadvantage to some of those who are canvassing a new change. I don't want to mention. In fact, the fact that you were born a Muslim doesn't make you a Muslim. So many people call themselves Muslims are not Muslims. So many people call themselves Christians are not Christians. They are just Christians by names. So we should not even. I think we are wasting our time talking of individuals. Most of those people who steal money in government have names like David or Mark or whatever. So it's not about your name, your nomenclature. It's not even about your faith. It's about your integrity.
Do you think I can have gotten involved in all of this?
Of course, Khan can no longer fold his arms because look at the kidnapping of Catholic priests. If Khan is not relevant, then why you adorn bishops to come and attend? Bishops and bishops to come and attend the unveiling of Shetima. Religion is very important, but we don't have to play it to this level. I think there is a lot of distraction to the seriousness of governance in this country, and we must come to serious terms with governance.
On a final note, what outlook do you think the 2023 elections should have? What do you think should be the issues?
The issues
that people should be focusing on.
about economy and security.
Okay.
Economy and security. Because, in fact, security comes first. Because even we talk of economy, if lives are not safe, you cannot run an economy. You can't go to the farms to go and farm if your life is not secured. So security must come first and must be on the front burner of any discussion during the 2023 elections. And I think I'm one of those who say that must we even have the election in 2023? Because I feel that we must solve the problem, that is disuniting us before we talk of elections. If we solve the divisive tendencies, there was never a time we said we should go on regional thing, if not because the federal system is not working. So let us now come to terms with the regional arrangement, restructuring, before we go into elections. Because when we go into elections, we are still going to do what we call cosmetic application. And a woman is old, and you keep on rubbing the pancake and so on that is just the Nigerian state for you. We keep on rubbing, making reforms and so on, but let us restructure. Structural, critical restructuring is what we need in this country.
Thank you very much, Otunba, Dele, for coming on to this edition of Conversation with Adaba FM. Thank you very much. This is where we'll call it today on today's edition of the program. My name is Dimeji. Thank you for being part of it, and thank you for listening. Good afternoon.
For number one radio.